Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another issue of Affairs of State. I'm very pleased this evening to have with me as my guest the chairman of the House Committee on Energy, Representative Larry Alexander from Marblehead. I guess you represent Marblehead and Swampscott, right?
And even a little precinct in Lynn as well.
And a little precinct in Lynn. Our subject today will be, of course, energy. I also serve on the Committee on Energy, and again, I'm very pleased to have my chairman with me today, and I hope that we can give you some insight on some of the energy problems in the Commonwealth and in the nation today. Larry, welcome aboard.
Thank you, John. It's very nice to be here. It's a pleasure serving with you in the legislature and on the committee, and it's nice to be in your own home area as well.
Thank you very much. I guess the first thing we should talk about, and the thing that you and I have been getting a lot of calls about and a lot of concerns from constituency and everybody really, and that's the price of heating oil and what can we do or what is being done or what might be done in the future to hopefully alleviate this situation.
Well, the price increases have been absolutely incredible. I think people are literally gasping at how high the prices have gone over the last several weeks. Actually, only over the last few weeks, how dramatically prices have risen. People have seen bills going from under $1 per gallon to $1.50 and even higher now. I think it behooves us to look into why has that happened. Are there factors that go beyond just cold weather that cause the prices to go up so much? And were there people who are responsible who took advantage of the situation and tried to gouge the consumer in the process? I don't know the answers to those questions. The hearing that the Energy Committee is having will be providing some of those answers, we hope, because we are having people from different segments of the oil industry there for us to ask questions of. But it's certainly been very troublesome. It seems as though one of the reasons was the cold weather and the fact that Europe and Texas were very cold at the same time, and there was a huge demand for oil. And unfortunately, what happened was that a lot of the oil wholesalers didn't have very much oil on hand in their inventories. They kept their inventories much lower than they've done in previous years. Now, if it had been a mild winter this winter or a mild December, people might have said, well, that was good because the wholesaler didn't have to carry all this oil and the consumer didn't have to pay as much, conceivably, for having this oil on hand that might have been bought ahead of time, perhaps at a higher rate than otherwise. On the other hand, with the season being very cold, these having low inventories meant that they were very vulnerable to cold weather, and when the cold weather came, it seems as though they didn't have enough oil, so therefore to get more oil meant that in the normal market setting that there was a lot of competition for buying that oil and the price kept surging upwards. I think that one thing that we need to look very carefully at is why were these inventories so low? Was that an imprudent decision to keep those inventories so low? In order to prevent this kind of thing happening again in the future, it seems to me one of the things we could do is to make sure that inventories are kept up at reasonable levels so that we'll never have to worry about this kind of sudden price surge happening as quickly.
It almost seems like they operate on a in and out situation instead of having an inventory to buy it as they need it.
Exactly.
And depend on the transportation system to be able to get it there. But it seems to me that one of the problems is that there's a lot of jockeying going on for price, for market price, and a lot of gambling going on on the part of the oil industry. And I don't say the wholesalers and distributors or the local retailer, I guess, is the one. I don't blame him, but it's the people that are looking at international oil prices and saying, if I don't buy too much now, maybe the price will come down in a month and I can get it for $15 a barrel instead of $20 a barrel or something like that. And I just think that this is a part of it, but I don't think it's the whole problem. I think there's a whole combination of problems that came into effect at the same time. But I did notice that the oil barrel per barrel prices have markedly increased too.
Well,
and
I
that's not dependent to any great extent on heating oil, but dependent on the
Yeah.
whole
Actually, my understanding was
petroleum
that was
industry.
staying pretty stable. The price from the oil producers actually getting it out of the ground has been actually stable during this time period, and that's why you need to question what other segments further along, closer to the consumer, what did they do that caused the prices to go up so high, and if there is a factor that is due to bad judgment or just due to nature, things beyond people's control, like bad weather or whatever, that cause prices to have to go up some amount, I think what we need to do is explore whether there were, at each level of the industry or at any one of those levels, did the wholesalers or did the retailers even say, well, it's going up anyway, if I add on 2 or 3 cents more, is anybody going to notice or not?
I think,
I don't know.
yeah.
I think we need to look at that because certainly during these times it would really be unconscionable to try to gouge the consumer.
I think that's the kind of thing that I hope we can get out of our hearing, because
Right.
at our hearing, I understand we're going to have people from the top to bottom in the oil industry,
Right.
from the retailer to the refiner practically.
Right.
And I think we have to get some of the curves in the various products. In other words, did the gasoline price parallel the fuel oil price? Did the lubricating oil price parallel the, so if it was just a general market up price with everything, then I think we can understand it. But if we see that there's a fuel oil price goes up like this, and gasoline prices only went up like that, seems to me that would indicate to me that somebody took advantage of the cold weather. And we've got to put a finger on who took advantage of the cold weather. And I think that'll be a very important part of the kind of conclusion that perhaps we can get out of that
right. And
meeting.
if prices had to go up this amount, then the next question is whether the next level closer to the consumer raised prices only that amount more, or whether they raised them more and more and more.
Yeah.
I don't know if they did or not. I mean, and I'm sure it's going to be huge variation within each segment of the industry. But that's the kind of question we need to ask, so that consumers will feel that government at least is trying to find out whether anybody made an unconscionable profit out of them or not. I don't know the answer yet, but I hope we'll find out. There's a whole other factor too, of course, dealing with the traders in energy issues. And the president of the New York Mercantile Exchange, J. Patrick Thompson's coming to the hearing as well in order to talk about what factor that exchange is. In other words, now, as of the last decade or so, oil futures are traded just like pork belly futures. And so there's a lot that isn't based so much on reality as psychology and people's hunches about are oil prices going up or down, and that played a big part potentially as well in why prices went up, because people trading on futures thought it was going up, and so it kept going up.
Right.
We'll look into that as well.
One of the other factors in heating in this area particularly, and perhaps more so in other parts of the country, what has happened to natural gas prices? Are they free market prices too, or is natural gas more regulated, or what?
Yeah, the
has
price of
happened?
natural gas is regulated. They've got to come before regulatory agencies and justify the price that they're charging. They usually try to stick somewhat close to oil prices, but they do come before a regulatory agency and show what their prices are and so forth. Whereas in the case of the oil industry, we don't do that to the oil industry. It's pretty much a free market, and the notion in a free market, of course, is that if one person's charging more for oil than another dealer down the road, we'll try to undercut that person and get a better competitive edge, and the consumer will win out by getting a lower price. And at that kind of motivation will keep the price down as much as possible. But for some reason, those market forces didn't seem to work as well during this recent heating oil price surge,
I
as you would think.
I wonder if they really do work anyway, because it seems to me that no matter where you call, what oil company you call, they all have the same prices.
Right, exactly. Well,
And so it's not really, well, we'll sell it to you for 3 pennies cheaper because we want your business.
Right.
And
I think that's one thing
force
we have
may
to
be missing
explore.
to some
Why
extent.
why isn't the regular market force working the way we want it to work? And if it isn't working as well, what can we do as a government in the future to make sure it does work?
Mhm.
Should we say, and these are just questions I'm posing without necessarily making conclusions, should we say that that we should require certain levels of inventory in all home heating oil wholesalers at minimum, so that we don't get into this kind of pinch again in the future? Should we say that if there is a giant price surge, that at that point it can be declared an energy emergency, and then the state would have powers over reviewing prices?
Well, I think that really, and I suppose we shouldn't get anybody feeling too confident that we're going to be able to do much about the situation this year, because the oil price has already peaked and is on its way back down again, although it always comes down a lot slower than it goes up.
And we shouldn't forget the memory of
And
the price increase.
Yeah, we should learn some real lessons from this crisis, and hopefully be able to prevent it in the future.
Yeah, I hope so.
The other subject that I wanted to touch on, unless you got anything else you think of in that area, I know I wish I could say something to alleviate the problems that I get from constituency, particularly elderly people who are on very limited income, and they're at the prices of oil today. The oil price is almost as much as their income for the months of January and February.
Well, you touch on a very key element that we've got to look at in this state, which is that for people who are on fixed incomes, people who receive fuel assistance, of which there are a great number of people, including people who don't receive any other kind of government assistance, really, to speak of, but need that extra little fuel assistance to get by in the winter because it is such a necessity of life. How are they going to do this year? And unfortunately, as it is, our fuel assistance budget isn't as high as it ought to be, even before this problem took place and the huge increase in prices. And now it's going to be even more insufficient. And that's a real problem. I mean, the good news is that Massachusetts, unlike many states, supplements the amount of fuel assistance that the federal government provides. We have a very major fuel assistance program that we ourselves pay for in addition to the federal government money. But even with that, it's less than it was before, and now with prices of home heating oil being 50% higher than people had anticipated, the allotment that people get is going to run out much quicker. So we may have to do some supplemental funding of that, which in this kind of a budget crisis is going to be a very difficult task to do. I think we have to look to the future too, though, and that is that the federal government has to come through more in terms of the fuel assistance that it provides. One member of your party, the president, actually came in and proposed less money for fuel assistance this year than we had last year, which I think is outrageous. Another member of your party, fortunately Representative Silvio Conte from Massachusetts, said that was outrageous, and he has been very instrumental in helping to push those fuel assistance levels back up in Congress, and hopefully he'll be able to do that again together with the Democratic delegation in Massachusetts.
Well, and you know, one other factor, you mentioned federal and state government assistance for fuel. I wonder if perhaps from this crisis we might be able to learn something or develop a little more private sector input into fuel assistance. For example, charitable organizations and people helping people kinds of programs. I guess I'm talking a little bit of 1,000 points of light here at this
Well, the
point,
Salvation Army, of course, has had a very nice program, the Good Neighbor Fund, which has supplemented fuel assistance for people who have run out of their allotment. They look at it on a case-by-case basis.
But I think there's not much awareness of that, and I think the more emphasis we can put on and the more cooperation we can get from private sources, rather than always reaching to the government for more and more. And you know, it's again becomes which comes first, chicken or the egg? Do we cut federal expense first and state expense and force that, or do we let that develop enough to allow us to cut federal and state expense? I mean, see, the
problem is that even the Good Neighbor Fund, I mean, that raised, I think, $3 or $4 million,
Mhm.
and the amount of state funding of fuel assistance is about 4 or 5 times that amount.
I was going to
And
say
that-
it's somewhere in
and
the vicinity of 20, 25 million.
And that isn't enough. And
Yeah.
so just relying on private sources is a problem, both because they're unlikely to produce the amount you need, and
Mhm.
also to respond to an emergency, they may not be able to
Mhm.
get the kind of levels of funding that they need as quickly. And
Yeah.
I was very surprised to find, I don't know if I saw it right before the Christmas season, that the Salvation Army down in southeastern Massachusetts, one of those offices said it was going to have to close
Mhm.
5 days before Christmas until after Christmas because they'd run out of money.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was the first time I've heard a
Yeah.
charity say that. Now, the next day people came through and helped
Mhm.
fund it, but I think it's a little too up in the air. I think the state needs to make sure that the money is there, because senior citizens need that reassurance. When they're sitting at home, they want to make sure there will be money left for the end of the season, and they
Mhm.
shouldn't have to choose between eating and,
That's
and,
right.
and keeping warm,
Right,
and
right.
they shouldn't be shivering in their own homes. I mean,
Mhm.
it's important for their health to have a warm house. So basically, hopefully, any of them that find that they may be running out should, as early as possible, contact the Fuel Assistance Office and contact their church or their temple and other organizations to let them know they might need help towards
Well,
the
I guess
end of the season.
what I would only reinforce that with is to say to people who are in the agencies like the churches and the temples and the Salvation Army, is to let people know that they are doing this sort
Mhm.
of thing. I think a lot of people just don't know who to
Yeah.
turn to, and their first reaction is to turn to the government, and perhaps if they knew of other people to turn to, they may feel more comfortable turning to them. They may not,
Maybe.
but I just think it all
Yeah.
has to be a big cooperative package in the long run.
Yeah, the thing is that I haven't looked at figures about charitable giving, but I suspect that they are probably down because the sales tax is down, for instance. I
Mhm.
think even though people's incomes aren't down overall in the state, people are holding on to their money
Right.
instead of spending it,
Mhm.
and so therefore our sales tax revenues is down. I wouldn't be surprised if charitable giving is also down, as
Yeah.
people are a little more cautious about
I
spending their
think,
money right now.
unfortunately, it has been a trend that charitable giving has dropped off, and
Yeah.
of course, more and more people looking all the time for money
Yeah.
too. The other subject, and I don't, we have a few minutes left to talk about, is the greenhouse bill that you pioneered in the legislature.
Well, you've
and I
been very helpful on it
co-sponsored.
too, John. You've been
And
great on it.
I think it was a very interesting bill. I think I supported the bill in committee, except for one little part that I had some problems with concerning automobiles, but I'm sure you'll touch on that when you just kind of give us a summary
Sure.
of what the greenhouse
Okay,
bill
well,
was.
well,
Unfortunately, didn't quite make it through the whole
No, but
session this year.
It did really well for its first year, and being
Mhm.
such a major bill, it passed the House, and the signs were looking pretty good in the Senate.
Mhm.
And we only had a few weeks in the Senate to even try, seeing if we could get it through the Senate, and in the midst of the budget crisis and everything. So
Yeah.
I am optimistic that this year we'll be able to pass it. Well, obviously everybody knows that there's this phenomenon known as the greenhouse effect that most scientists think is happening, which means that the temperature of the Earth is getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And for instance, 1989 turned out to be the 5th highest temperature year worldwide since 1880.
Maybe December blew it for us, being such a cold.
No, but I'm talking worldwide, though.
I know, I'm
Interesting.
sorry.
No, I mean, people, a lot of local columnists say, well, see, is there really a greenhouse effect because look at how, cold it was in
Yeah.
December or whatever. But worldwide, it was the 5th hottest year
Yeah.
since 1880,
Mhm.
1989. And most scientists agree there is something known as a greenhouse effect. And an even larger number of scientists agree that even if they're not sure right now, by the time they will know, it'll be too late to do anything about it, so we better act now.
Right.
And what this bill would do is reduce the greenhouse effect by doing a lot of energy efficiency programs that you get a twofer out of. You not only help the environment in terms of reducing the greenhouse effect, but you also save a lot of energy and save people a lot of money because their fuel bills will be a lot less by the programs we talk about. Just to let you know how high the temperature may be of this planet, scientists think that in the next 40 years it could rise 3 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but if it goes up as high as 8 degrees Fahrenheit, that's as high a temperature rise happening in the next 40 years as took place since the time of the dinosaurs to now. I mean, that's
Yeah.
how fast this temperature rise may happen. And so sea levels will rise, we'll have more hurricanes, there'll be drought. For people who like skiing, you can forget about skiing in this area because there won't be snow on the slopes, so forth and so on. So we really need to do something about it. About half of the greenhouse effect is due to energy stuff, of which about half of that is due to buildings and wasteful fuel uses in how we heat our buildings and use electricity. And the other half is due to the pollution from cars, the emissions coming out of cars. Cars make up 27% of all the emissions, the carbon dioxide emissions that cause the greenhouse effect. So in this bill, we call for a comprehensive program where we say that in terms of homes, we're going to try to make homes more energy efficient. In terms of state buildings, we're going to try to install energy efficient lighting throughout state buildings and make state buildings, public buildings, more energy efficient. And then when we say in terms of cars, we're going to try to encourage people to buy more fuel efficient cars in order to, again, reduce how much carbon dioxide is going forth into the atmosphere, and it'll help people get better mileage as well in miles per gallon. At each of those levels, we have programs. We have a voluntary home energy rating system, so if you're proud of all the energy improvements you put in your home, you could have a rating done of your home, and if you win a gold star in the top echelon, you'd be able to advertise that you're a gold star home, and hopefully the new buyer would get better mortgage terms from a bank for having that kind of a home. We say that for new homes that you're going to build, there would be a mandatory rating system of the new homes. For big buildings, the top 100 new buildings built in Massachusetts each year, we would review whether they're guzzlers of energy or sippers of energy. And sippers would actually get a bonus. The developers of those buildings would actually get money from a fund to congratulate them for building an energy efficient building. The money would be paid for by penalties that the guzzlers would have to put in order to...
Getting back to these larger industrial or commercial buildings, I think perhaps a little comment about the large hotels in Boston.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really surprised when I heard these numbers and these figures.
It's an astounding statistic.
That at this day and age, with the concern generally about energy conservation, that buildings so poorly energy efficient would be built, as for example the Westin Hotel in
the
Boston.
Copley Place structure.
Place,
the Copley Place development uses more electricity than does all of the city of Chelsea.
Yeah.
Which is just astounding.
Yeah.
And frankly, before it was built, Boston Edison, to its credit, went up to the folks who were building it and said, "Would you like us to help you design this so it'll be more energy efficient?" And they said, "No, thanks." So that's why we need some kind of an incentive, a financial incentive, to say, okay, you can do it that way, but you'll have to pay money into a fund if you're going to be a guzzler, because it's going to cost all the consumers more money in their electric bills if we have to give you electricity that you really didn't need, that you could have done it much more efficiently. So we have that kind of a program.
That's the part of the bill, the general overview of the bill that I liked about it in the first place, what it was. And this came as a result of some developments in past years. We've had individual bills for each one of these items over the years. But it was more of an incentive bill rather than putting the government into your lap again and telling you what you have to do, but adding some incentives to do the kinds of things that are in your best interest
and if you do them in a good way, a positive way, you actually get money from the fund. And the fund is meant to be self-supporting. The whole bill is meant to be such that the Commonwealth will save money from it, that it won't cost the Commonwealth any money overall. The net cost, there will be no net cost, it will all be hundreds of millions of dollars of net savings. The third area that we call for, which is kind of the sexiest area probably, is the notion of having sales tax on new cars vary according to how fuel efficient the car is within its size class. The Commonwealth wouldn't bring in a dime more or lose a dime on sales tax. It would have to still average 5% sales tax in the state. But for the first time, consumers would have a chance to beat the 5% sales tax, to potentially pay a sales tax of anywhere between 0 to 4% if they buy a car that's fuel efficient. And in order to do that, obviously the cars that are not fuel efficient, there would be a higher sales tax associated with anywhere from 6 to 10%. depending on how fuel efficient or inefficient that car was.
Mhm.
On average, though, the sales tax in the state would be 5%. And no matter what size class car a person wanted to buy, they would have an opportunity to beat the sales tax. So we're not telling everybody to go off and buy a subcompact car.
Right.
They could still buy a luxury car and take a look. And the average luxury car would probably be around the 5% range or
Mhm.
something like that. And the guzzlers would be higher than that. But on the other hand, the fuel-efficient ones would actually be lower than 5%. And we think that if you were a consumer and you were going to your local car dealer and there was one car that was a 3% sales tax and another a 7%, you know, and it was a $15,000 car, you'd say, well, gee, if I could save $600 or $700, I'm going to look more carefully at that one that's a 3% sales tax car, and that by consumers choosing those kinds of fuel-efficient cars, it'll be better for the environment, it'll be better for their fuel mileage, they'll save money not only on the sales tax, but on the gas savings that they'll be saving. But then on top of that, we think that Detroit will have to take notice and say, look at all these people buying fuel-efficient cars, I guess we'll build our cars more in a more fuel-efficient manner. And I think we need to do something like this because, unfortunately, despite good events happening in recent years where the miles per gallon of cars kept going up, unfortunately now we're backtracking. And in the last year, as a matter of fact, the average miles per gallon went down by 1 mile per gallon nationwide rather than up in terms of new cars. So, and again, it's not meant to bring in a dime more for the Commonwealth. Over time, this tax has to bring in the same amount we're making now, not more, not less. But it'll give
So,
consumers...
but the categories of cars would have to be reviewed every
year.
year?
Every year, the Commissioner of Revenue would be reviewing how to do the calculations so that we'd still get to the 5% over time. But it would be based on the EPA size classes. The EPA says, well, there are subcompacts, there are compacts, there are medium-sized cars, there's medium wagons, there's large wagons, station wagons, there's light trucks, there's luxury cars. And then within those size classes, they take a look at how fuel efficient was the vehicle. So you can still get the car of your dreams, you know, in terms of the size class, but just within that size class, we'd have an encouragement to you to buy the fuel efficient one.
Well, it certainly turned out to be the most controversial part of the bill, and I think, understandably, it would be.
Sure, it's a new system. But I'm pleased to say that even though controversial, the House passed it after a roll call vote, and it passed by a nice margin. And I think the more people look into it, I think the more they get used to the idea, knowing that they do have a choice. Nobody's forcing them to go out and buy a subcompact or a compact if that's not the kind of car they want to buy, that they can still choose the size class they want. But within that size class, they would be encouraged by the sales tax to buy a car that was fuel efficient.
All right. Well, thank you very much,
Sure,
Larry.
enjoyed talking with you.
I'm sorry we've run out of time.
It was a lot of fun, though.
It seems to go so fast when
does.
you get into these conversations. And thank you all very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the program, and I hope that perhaps you've learned something. Perhaps I've stimulated some questions, or Larry has stimulated some questions that you might want to call and let me know what you think about the program or what subjects you'd like to have on the program. Thank you again very much for listening and watching, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you.